the epic journey of US presidents. Hey there, history enthusiasts and curious minds, welcome to our channel. Today, we're embarking on a fascinating journey through the history of US presidents, from the very first to the current leader. From the founding fathers who shaped a nation to the modern-day leaders navigating a complex world, we'll delve into the lives, legacies, and yes, even the scandals of these powerful figures. Get ready to uncover the triumphs and tribulations, the landmark decisions, and the lasting impacts each president has had on the United States. We'll explore their backgrounds, their policies, and the events that define their presidencies. You might be surprised by what you learn about the people who have occupied the highest office in the land. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video and leave your comments about your favorite presidents. We're excited to share this historical adventure with you. So, buckle up, grab your thinking caps, and let's dive into the fascinating world of US presidents. George Washington, the first commander-in-chief. First up, we have the big cheese himself, the man who started it all, George Washington. Imagine being the first person to hold the office of President of the United States. No pressure, right? Washington, a hero of the American Revolution, wasn't just a leader in war, he was also a leader in peacetime. He established many of the precedents for the presidency, like the two-term limit, which as we'll see later wasn't always followed. From navigating the treacherous waters of international relations to establishing a stable economy, Washington set the bar pretty high for all who followed. He even chose the location for the White House, though he never actually got to live in it. Talk about a bummer, right? John Adams, the unsung hero. Next we have John Adams, our second president and the first to occupy the White House, though he might have preferred his old digs. Adams, a brilliant lawyer and diplomat, had big shoes to fill following Washington. His presidency was marked by growing pains as the young nation grappled with internal divisions and external threats. Despite facing a divided government and the looming threat of war with France, Adams managed to keep the country from falling apart. He also strengthened the Navy, which would prove pretty important down the line. While he might not be as famous as Washington, Adams's contributions to shaping the nation were no less significant. Thomas Jefferson, the man of contradictions. Thomas Jefferson, the author of the Declaration of Independence and a staunch advocate for individual liberty. But here's the thing about Jefferson, he was a man of contradictions. He wrote passionately about equality, yet owned slaves. He championed limited government, yet expanded presidential power with the Louisiana Purchase. Jefferson's presidency was a time of both great expansion and internal struggle. He doubled the size of the nation but grappled with the morality and legacy of slavery. It's this complexity that makes him such a fascinating figure in American history. James Madison, father of the Constitution, architect of war. James Madison, the shortest president, he was only 5 feet 4 inches, is often called the father of the Constitution. He played a pivotal role in drafting the document that continues to shape American governance today. But Madison's presidency wasn't all smooth sailing. He led the nation through the War of 1812, a conflict that tested the young nation's resilience. Despite facing a powerful British Empire, the United States held its own, solidifying its place on the world stage. Chapter 5. James Monroe. The Era of Good Feelings. Well, sort of. Next up is James Monroe, a president often associated with the Era of Good Feelings. And it's true, his presidency was marked by a period of relative national unity and economic prosperity. But let's not forget, it was also a time of growing sectionalism over slavery. Monroe is perhaps best known for the Monroe Doctrine, a bold foreign policy statement that warned European powers against meddling in the affairs of the Americas. This doctrine would have lasting implications for U.S. foreign policy in the centuries to come. Chapter 6. John Quincy Adams, a presidency marred by partisanship. John Quincy Adams, the son of our second president, was a brilliant diplomat and statesman. However, his presidency was plagued by bitter partisan fighting. The rise of Andrew Jackson and his populist movement created a deeply divided political landscape. Despite facing fierce opposition, Adams championed ambitious internal improvements and a strong national government. However, his vision for the country was often stymied by the political battles that defined his era. Chapter 7. Andrew Jackson, the people's president, with a complicated legacy. Andrew Jackson, a war hero and the champion of the common man, ushered in a new era of American politics. He was the first president to truly embrace populism, appealing directly to the people and expanding suffrage. But Jackson's legacy is also deeply intertwined with the tragedy of Native American removal and the expansion of slavery. His presidency marked a turning point in American history, as the nation grappled with questions of democracy, equality, and the rights of its citizens. Chapter 8. Martin Van Buren. The Panic of 1837 and a presidency cut short. Martin Van Buren, often overshadowed by his predecessor, faced an uphill battle from the start. The Panic of 1837, a severe economic depression, gripped the nation during his presidency, tarnishing his reputation and making him a one-term president. Despite his struggles, Van Buren was a skilled politician who played a key role in shaping the Democratic Party. He remained a prominent figure in American politics even after leaving office. Chapter 9. William Henry Harrison, the shortest presidency in history. William Henry Harrison holds a unique distinction in American history. He had the shortest presidency, serving only 31 days before dying of pneumonia. While his time in office was tragically brief, Harrison's election marked the rise of the Whig Party and their opposition to Jacksonian democracy. His sudden death threw the government into uncharted territory as the nation grappled with the question of presidential succession. Chapter 10. John Tyler, Harrison's vice president, became the first vice president to assume the presidency after the death of a sitting president. His ascension to the presidency was not without controversy, as questions lingered about the extent of his powers. Tyler, a staunch defender of states' rights, clashed with members of his own party and faced a tumultuous presidency. However, his time in office set a crucial precedent for presidential succession, solidifying the vice president's role as next in line. Chapter 11. James K. Polk, a one-term president with a clear agenda, is often remembered for his role in expanding the United States. Driven by the belief in manifest destiny, the idea that the U.S. was destined to expand across the continent, Polk oversaw the annexation of Texas, the acquisition of the Oregon Territory, and the Mexican-American War. His presidency marked a period of significant territorial growth, but also fueled tensions over slavery that would ultimately lead to the Civil War. Zachary Taylor, a national hero after his victories in the Mexican-American War, entered the White House with little political experience. His presidency was cut short after just 16 months when he died from a sudden illness. Despite his brief time in office, Taylor grappled with the growing sectional crisis over slavery. His sudden death shocked the nation, and further heightened tensions between the North and South. Millard Fillmore, Taylor's vice president, became president upon Taylor's death. He inherited a nation increasingly divided over the issue of slavery. Fillmore, a supporter of compromise, signed the Fugitive Slave Act, a deeply controversial law that required citizens to assist in the capture of runaway slaves. This act further inflamed tensions between the North and South, pushing the nation closer to the brink of civil war. Franklin Pierce's presidency was marked by growing sectionalism and the escalating crisis over slavery. His attempts to appease both the North and South by supporting the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which allowed for popular sovereignty on the issue of slavery in new territories, backfired spectacularly. The act led to violence and chaos in Kansas, further deepening the divide between slave and free states. James Buchanan, often ranked among the worst presidents in U.S. history, presided over a nation teetering on the edge of collapse. His inaction and indecision in the face of secession and the growing threat of civil war only exacerbated the crisis. Buchanan's presidency serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of political expediency and the importance of decisive leadership in times of national crisis. Abraham Lincoln, one of the most revered figures in American history, led the nation through its darkest hour, the Civil War. His unwavering commitment to preserving the Union, his eloquence in articulating the ideals of freedom and equality, and his ultimate sacrifice continue to inspire generations of Americans. Lincoln's presidency stands as a testament to the power of leadership, the resilience of the human spirit, and the enduring legacy of hope. Andrew Johnson, Lincoln's successor, faced the daunting task of rebuilding a nation shattered by war. His Reconstruction policies, often at odds with the radical Republicans in Congress, aimed to reintegrate the South into the Union, but sparked a bitter political struggle. Johnson's impeachment trial, though he was ultimately acquitted, highlighted the tensions between the executive and legislative branches in the aftermath of the Civil War. Ulysses S. Grant, the celebrated Civil War general, brought his military prowess to the White House. His presidency was marked by efforts to protect the rights of African Americans during Reconstruction and to combat corruption within the government. However, Grant's administration was also plagued by scandal and economic challenges. His legacy remains complex, a mix of achievements and shortcomings. A reminder that even the most celebrated heroes can be flawed leaders. Rutherford B. Hayes's presidency marked the end of Reconstruction and the beginning of a new era in American politics. His election, which followed a disputed and controversial election, ultimately led to the withdrawal of federal troops from the South. This decision, while ending the political crisis, also allowed for the rise of Jim Crow laws and the disenfranchisement of African Americans in the South. James A. Garfield's presidency was tragically cut short after only 6 months when he was assassinated by a disgruntled office seeker. His brief time in office offered a glimpse of his potential as a reformer, but his assassination sent shockwaves through the nation. Garfield's death sparked a national conversation about civil service reform and the dangers of political patronage. Chester A. Arthur, Garfield's vice president, became president after Garfield's assassination. To the surprise of many, Arthur, known for his ties to the spoils system, embraced civil service reform and signed the Pendleton Civil Service Reform Act into law. His presidency demonstrated that even the most unlikely figures can rise to the occasion and leave a lasting impact on the nation. Grover Cleveland, the first Democrat-elected president after the Civil War, served 2 non-consecutive terms. His first term was marked by his commitment to fiscal conservatism, civil service reform, and his opposition to political corruption. Cleveland's presidency represented a departure from the laissez-faire policies of the Gilded Age, as he sought to rein in the excesses of big business and promote government regulation. Benjamin Harrison, the grandson of William Henry Harrison, served a single term sandwiched between Grover Cleveland's 2 presidencies. His presidency was marked by a resurgence of Republican power and the passage of the McKinley Tariff, which raised protective tariffs on imported goods. Harrison also signed the Sherman Antitrust Act, a landmark piece of legislation aimed at curbing the power of monopolies. Grover Cleveland returned to the White House for a second non-consecutive term, facing a nation grappling with economic depression. The Panic of 1893, a severe financial crisis, tested Cleveland's leadership as he navigated unemployment, labor unrest, and the depletion of the Treasury's gold reserves. His handling of the crisis, while controversial, demonstrated his commitment to fiscal conservatism and his belief in limited government intervention in the economy. William McKinley's presidency marked a turning point in American history as the nation emerged from the Gilded Age and embraced its role as a global power. McKinley led the United States to victory in the Spanish-American War, expanding American influence in the Caribbean and the Pacific. His assassination in 1901, just 6 months into his second term, thrust the nation into a new era under the leadership of his charismatic vice president, Theodore Roosevelt. Theodore Roosevelt, the youngest person to become president at the age of 42, brought a new energy and dynamism to the White House. Known for his boundless energy, his speak softly and carry a big stick foreign policy, and his commitment to conservation, Roosevelt left an indelible mark on the presidency. He broke up monopolies, strengthened the Navy, and established national parks, forever changing the landscape of American politics and environmental policy. William Howard Taft, Roosevelt's hand-picked successor, continued some of his predecessor's progressive policies, but his presidency was ultimately overshadowed by Roosevelt's larger-than-life persona. Taft, a lawyer by training, later served as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, becoming the only person to hold both positions. His presidency, while marked by some achievements, is often remembered as a bridge between the Progressive Era and the tumultuous years leading up to World War I. Woodrow Wilson, a former president of Princeton University, led the United States through World War I. His 14 points, a plan for post-war peace, aimed to prevent future conflicts and promote international cooperation. Wilson's vision for a League of Nations, though ultimately unsuccessful in gaining U.S. participation, laid the groundwork for future international organizations. Warren G. Harding's presidency was marked by a desire for a return to normalcy after the tumultuous years of World War I. However, his administration was plagued by scandal, most notably the Teapot Dome scandal, which involved the leasing of government oil reserves to private companies. Harding died in office in 1923, leaving behind a legacy tarnished by corruption and a reminder of the importance of ethical leadership. Calvin Coolidge, known as Silent Cal for his quiet demeanor, presided over the economic boom of the Roaring Twenties. His laissez-faire economic policies, characterized by tax cuts and deregulation, contributed to the era's prosperity but also played a role in the stock market crash of 1929. Coolidge's presidency is often seen as a symbol of both the successes and excesses of the Jazz Age. Herbert Hoover, elected just months before the stock market crash of 1929, faced the daunting task of leading the nation through the Great Depression. His initial response to the economic crisis, characterized by a belief in volunteerism and limited government intervention, proved inadequate to stem the tide of unemployment and economic hardship. Hoover's presidency, once filled with promise, became synonymous with the suffering and despair of the Depression era. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, elected in 1932 amidst the depths of the Great Depression, ushered in a new era of American governance with his New Deal programs. His bold actions, including the creation of Social Security, the Works Progress Administration, and the Civilian Conservation Corps, provided relief, recovery, and reform, fundamentally altering the role of government in American life. Roosevelt's leadership during the Depression and World War II made him one of the most consequential presidents in U.S. history. Harry S. Truman, thrust into the presidency after Roosevelt's death in 1945, faced the monumental challenges of ending World War II and navigating the emerging Cold War. He made the fateful decision to use atomic bombs against Japan, ending the war but ushering in the atomic age. Truman's leadership during the early years of the Cold War, marked by the Truman Doctrine and the Marshall Plan, helped contain the spread of communism and shaped the post-war world. Dwight D. Eisenhower, the supreme Allied commander in Europe during World War II, brought his military experience and steady hand to the White House. His presidency was marked by the continuation of the Cold War, the Korean War, and the beginning of the space race. Eisenhower's farewell address, in which he warned of the dangers of the military-industrial complex, remains a powerful reminder of the importance of civilian control of the military. John F. Kennedy, the youngest elected president in U.S. history, captivated the nation with his charisma, his vision of a new frontier, and his call to ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. His presidency, though tragically cut short by his assassination in 1963, left an enduring legacy of hope, idealism, and a renewed commitment to public service. Kennedy's actions during the Cuban Missile Crisis helped avert nuclear war, and his support for the civil rights movement helped advance the cause of equality. Lyndon B. Johnson, Kennedy's vice president, assumed the presidency after Kennedy's assassination and went on to win a landslide victory in 1964. He championed ambitious domestic programs known as the Great Society, which included Medicare, Medicaid, and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. However, Johnson's presidency was also consumed by the Vietnam War, which escalated dramatically under his leadership, dividing the nation and casting a long shadow over his legacy. Richard Nixon's presidency was marked by both significant foreign policy achievements, such as détente with the Soviet Union and the opening to China, and a domestic scandal that would ultimately force his resignation. The Watergate scandal, which involved a break-in at the Democratic National Committee headquarters and the subsequent cover-up, revealed a pattern of abuse of power and obstruction of justice. Nixon's resignation in 1974 left a lasting stain on the presidency and eroded public trust in government. Gerald Ford, Nixon's vice president, became the first unelected president in U.S. history when he assumed the presidency after Nixon's resignation. He faced the daunting task of restoring public trust in government after the Watergate scandal and healing a nation divided by the Vietnam War. Ford's pardon of Nixon, while controversial, aimed to move the nation beyond the Watergate chapter and allow for healing. Jimmy Carter, a former peanut farmer and governor of Georgia, campaigned on a promise of honesty and integrity after the Watergate era. His presidency was marked by both foreign policy successes, such as the Camp David Accords between Israel and Egypt, and challenges including the Iran hostage crisis and the energy crisis. Carter's idealism and commitment to human rights earned him respect, but his inability to resolve the hostage crisis ultimately contributed to his defeat in the 1980 election. Ronald Reagan, a former Hollywood actor and governor of California, ushered in an era of conservative politics and a renewed sense of American optimism. His economic policies, known as Reaganomics, emphasized tax cuts, deregulation, and a reduction in the size of government. Reagan's tough stance against the Soviet Union and his role in the fall of the Berlin Wall earned him recognition as a pivotal figure in the end of the Cold War. George H.W. Bush, Reagan's vice president, continued many of his predecessors' policies, but his presidency was largely defined by foreign policy challenges. He successfully navigated the end of the Cold War, oversaw the reunification of Germany, and led the U.S. to victory in the Persian Gulf War, expelling Iraqi forces from Kuwait. However, Bush's inability to address a recession at home contributed to his defeat in the 1992 election. Bill Clinton, the first Democrat-elected president since Jimmy Carter, ushered in an era of economic prosperity and a more centrist approach to governance. His New Democrat philosophy embraced free trade welfare reform and a balanced budget. Clinton's presidency was also marked by a booming economy, technological innovation, and a focus on globalization. George W. Bush's presidency was forever shaped by the events of September 11, 2001. The terrorist attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon led to the launch of the War on Terror, the invasion of Afghanistan, and the subsequent invasion of Iraq. Bush's presidency was also marked by the Great Recession, the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression. Barack Obama: Hope, Change, and a Nation Divided. Barack Obama, the first African-American president of the United States, inspired millions with his message of hope and change. He signed the Affordable Care Act into law, oversaw the end of the Iraq War, and ordered the raid that killed Osama bin Laden. However, Obama's presidency was also marked by intense partisan gridlock, the rise of political polarization, and the ongoing challenges of economic inequality and racial tensions. Donald Trump: Disruption, Division, and a Test of Democracy. Donald Trump, a businessman and reality TV star, upended American politics with his populist message, his unconventional style, and his use of social media. His presidency was marked by tax cuts, deregulation, and a conservative shift in the judiciary. Trump's presidency was also deeply polarizing, characterized by his rhetoric on immigration, trade, and race relations, as well as his impeachment by the House of Representatives. Joe Biden: Unity, Crisis, and the Path Forward. Joe Biden, Barack Obama's vice president, became the oldest person to assume the presidency at the age of 78. He inherited a nation grappling with the COVID-19 pandemic, an economic crisis, and deep political divisions. Biden's presidency has been marked by his efforts to address the pandemic, provide economic relief, and restore America's global leadership. The enduring legacy of U.S. presidents. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed this journey through the history of U.S. presidents. From the founding fathers to the present day, each president has left their mark on the nation and the world. Their triumphs and failures, their decisions and legacies continue to shape the course of history. As we've seen, the presidency is a complex and ever-evolving institution, reflecting the changing values, challenges, and aspirations of the American people. Don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and leave your comments about your favorite presidents. Who knows, maybe this video will inspire you to learn more about the fascinating history of the U.S. presidency.